The endgame ball lightning build has had many variations and takes on it, but this version right here takes the crown. This ball lightning build in my eyes is truly immortal and can be used to destroy the abbatoir of Zir in tier 100 nightmare dungeons with ease. We truly have 100% uptime on our barriers, which means our health bar isn't touched. The best thing about this build is that it requires no uber uniques at all. Yes, I farmed Duriel for well over 200 runs and didn't get the melted heart of Selig, which a lot of other immortal ball lightning builds rely on, which is why I decided to create this version of the build in the first place. You can use the timestamps below to go through each section of the build in sequence. So let's go over the crux of the build and how it works first. The main idea of this build is to have 100% uptime on our barriers, which primarily comes from our protection skill, which grants 30% of our max life as a barrier whenever we use a cooldown. We cycle through our defensive cooldowns, ice armor, flame shield, and teleport, so we can not only gain the survival benefits that these cooldowns provide, but we can generate a barrier constantly on top as well. Where this build is different to a lot of other ball lightning builds is that we use the Ice Blades enchantment. Ice Blades enchantment spawns additional Ice Blades whenever we use our cooldowns. And thanks to one of the Ice Blades modifiers we pick up, every time Ice Blades hits an enemy, it reduces the cooldown of our other skills. As we're spamming so many cooldowns, including our ultimate ability cooldown, we're going to generate multiple Ice Blades on the battlefield, which will cumulatively reduce our cooldowns by a lot. And then thanks to our key passive overflowing energy, whenever our crackling energy hits an enemy, our shock skill cooldowns are reduced on top. So with both of these things working synergistically together, you're going to have your teleport cooldown in particular come back consistently every few seconds. And teleport is great to spam because it also provides an additional 30% damage reduction whenever you use it. Speaking of damage reduction, we want to stack as much DR as possible so that when we do have our barriers up, we're taking as little damage as possible. And rather than going for the usual damage reduction stats you see on other builds, we're actually looking for damage reduction when injured as the main stat to chase on this build. Damage reduction when injured is found on legs, boots, and amulet, and you want this stat on all three items so that we have a massive amount of damage reduction. And then to make it even more ridiculous, we stack this with the Vampiric Power Resilience, which allows us to have even more damage reduction on top when we run around with low health. Once you're in that injured health range, all these damage reduction stats kick in, and with your infinite uptime on barriers, your health bar literally won't budge. In terms of mana regeneration, because we are absolutely spamming the living daylights out of our cooldowns, we basically only need Prodigy's aspects, which will take care of our mana issues, along with crackling energy also providing a ton of mana through our build itself. So let's go through the skill tree. So we start off by putting 2 points into Firebolt, which we actually use as our second enchantment in this build, which allows us to burn enemies whenever we damage them. This is super important because we can then benefit from damage reduction and damage increase to burning enemies in our Paragon board. 1 point into Devastation, so we can put 3 points into Elemental Dominance, 1 point into Potent Warding, 1 point into Flame Shield, and then 5 points into Teleport alongside Enhanced and Shimmering Teleport. We put 5 points into Teleport specifically because we want to reduce its cooldown as much as possible so we can spam the hell out of it and keep that 30% damage reduction alongside our barriers up as much as possible. 3 points into Glass Cannon, though if you're struggling to survive, then you can take these points away and put them elsewhere. 1 point into Ice Armor, 3 points into Elemental Attunement, and then we put 1 point into Ice Blades and get Enhanced and Summoned Ice Blades for that super important cooldown reduction. 1 point into Align the Element, so we can put 3 points into Protection and 3 points into Mana Shield. I don't think for the purposes of this build, Conjuration Mastery is that important. Your Unstable Currents uptime isn't that high for us to benefit from this increased damage, and the focus of this build is survivability. I then put 3 points into Ice Veil, which increases the duration of our barriers, which is super important. 1 point into Inner Flame so we can unlock Devouring Blaze, which means we have increased critical strike damage against burning enemies, which thanks to Firebolt enchantment should be any enemy you hit with Ball Lightning. 5 ranks of Ball Lightning itself, Enhanced and Wizard's Ball Lightning, 1 rank of Static Discharge so we can get 3 ranks of Invigorating Conduit for even more mana regeneration. Unstable Currents is our ultimate along with Prime and Supreme Unstable Currents. Put 1 point into Coursing Current so you can put 3 points into Electrocution And then finally, as I mentioned before, Overflowing Energy is our key passive, which will not only reduce your teleport cooldown, but will also reduce your ultimate ability cooldown as well. Let's go over our gear. I'm going to start off with the amulet because that's where the most important aspect goes for the extra 50% benefit. Aspect of Disobedience should be placed here because that extra armor is going to really help you survive. Your amulet should also have damage reduction when injured and mana cost reduction as mandatory stats. Other damage reduction stats, total armor, movement speed, ranks to mastery skills are also very desirable stats here. Then for your helmet, you want total armor, maximum life, and cooldown reduction. I put the ever-living warlord aspect here so we take less damage from vulnerable enemies, which we make our enemies through our vampiric powers. Like I said, no uber uniques are required for this build, but the Harlequin crest would be an amazing direct upgrade here if you do have one. For your chest piece, you want total armor, damage reduction when close, other damage reduction stats, and maximum life. I put on the unwavering aspect here so we get our cooldowns back even faster. Our gloves have attack speed, critical strike chance against injured enemies, and then the fourth stat doesn't matter too much. This is where I put our gravitational ball lightning aspect. For your pants, damage reduction when injured, ranks of ball lightning, and total armor are key here. And then you want another damage reduction stat on top. I put the snow veiled aspect here so we gain even more armor when we cast ice armor. For your boots, you want damage reduction when injured, mana cost reduction, ranks of teleport, and movement speed ideally. Here I put the Exploiter's aspect for more damage to unstoppable enemies. For your rings, you absolutely want the Talrasha's ring, which you can get pretty quickly from farming Varshan, so you can gain up to an additional 60% damage. For the other ring, you want critical strike chance, damage to close enemies, maximum life, and resource generation. This is where I put the Prodigy's aspect. For your weapon, you want a one-handed dagger for the intrinsic damage to close enemies. Damage to close enemies, mastery skill damage, all stats, intellect, critical strike damage are all very useful stats here. Then for your focus, you want critical strike chance, mana cost reduction, resource generation, and cooldown reduction. Here I put the conceited aspect to deal more damage when we have a barrier up. In terms of our vampiric powers, we use infection, which gives us another 15% damage boost through Talrasha's ring, resilience, which is mandatory for the build, for even more damage reduction because we always have low health when we're running around. We then run Prey on the Weak, which is the way we apply vulnerable to our enemies. A curse touches the vampiric curse we use through which Prey on the Weak applies vulnerable. Ravenous gives us that attack speed bonus which really increases the DPS of our ball lightning. Next, let's go over our Paragon board. I will put a link to a D4 planner so you can go over this in your own time in the comments below. On our first board, we put the Territorial glyph. We then unlock the Elemental Summoner board and place the Enchanter glyph here for both the damage increase and resistances it provides. I've also picked up Reservoir here as well. Enchantment Master is our next board. Here I put the Elementalist glyph, which provides 15% more damage on top. Then our next board is Burning Instinct. This is where we place our Tears of Blood Abbatoir of Zir glyph. You can see I've pretty much picked up all the stats around this glyph and the rare nodes which gain a bonus from the Tears of Blood glyph. If you haven't unlocked this yet, then use the exploit glyph until you clear tier 1 of Abbatoir of Zir. Then I got the Frigid Fate board and we do pick up this legendary node for once. Here I've socketed our Adept glyph. Then go for the Ceaseless Conduit board where I've used the Charge glyph for a further 15% damage bonus. Searing Heat is our next board and I apply the Control glyph here. And then finally I used the Static Surge board where I applied the Destruction glyph. So there you have it, my complete final version of the Ball Lightning build as we approach the end of Season 2. We have infinite uptime on our barriers, massive damage reduction which allows us to tank any content in the game whatsoever. If you enjoyed what I talked about today, remember to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more Diablo builds as we get closer to Season 3. I'm Mr. Ronnet and that's it for today. Peace out guys.